I'd like to now welcome to the stage Jim Rogers and Dr Kathryn Goozee. Jim was diagnosed with early onset dementia 4 years ago in November 2021, and his story has resonated widely through the ABC's Magnificent Australian Story and the Imperfects podcast, and his widely listened to podcast Hold the Moment. Jim is joined by Dr Kathryn Goozee, nurse practitioner and founding director of the Cara Institute of Neurological Diseases, also known as Cara Minds. Now, she's also an honorary associate professor at Macquarie University. Kathryn has over 35 years of clinical practice, and since establishing her Cara Minds in 2015 has conducted over 45 clinical trials in dementia, offering memory clinics and specialist services. But before we hear from Jim, let's have a look at a bit of his life's journey so far.
That strips you of the things you hold so dear, which are your memories, people that you love, and the thought of me not recognising Ty or my kids or my grandkids like that, I just can't even think about that, because that is all, that's everything, isn't it, really? What is important is the people, your family, your health, and laughing, doing good stuff, being kind to people. These are the things that really give you ultimate, true happiness. This is Hold the Moment. I'm Jim Rogers, and I'm living with younger onset Alzheimer's. I don't really want to be defined by dementia, but I've always been a chatterbox. And so while I've got a voice, I'm happy to use it. I've got Alzheimer's. Deal with it.
He's starting this conversation in a way that I think we haven't really had before. Jim is someone with a lot to give, and my sense is he knows that maybe there's a limit to how long he can continue to give to others for, but while he can, he's doing it as much as he possibly can.
He's become like the pin-up boy for Alzheimer's. He's just embraced it. He loves sharing his message.
You've just got to try and change the narrative a little bit and make the best of what you got.
So inspired by this. So I wanted to live life a little bit differently.
Thank you.
Wow, and I never imagined that I'd be sitting here with the pin-up boy. It's an absolute highlight. But how inspiring are you? Some of you may not have watched The Australian Story, but when I watched that, I was so overwhelmed with just the fullness of your life and the way in which you've journeyed through some fairly significant, times that have been quite difficult. And I'll start, for those that didn't watch The Australian Story, it started with saying, you're from the UK, which they'll probably pick up with your accent.
Yeah.
Midlands, you first married somebody who you went to school with, childhood sweetheart. You had 3 beautiful children, and that was shown on The Australian Story. So that's Millie and Harvey and also Daisy. And I think, what a lovely story that was, the beginning. And then you found Australia. You came out to Australia to experience the lovely beaches and the lifestyle here. But then the devastation of the fact that your beautiful wife, Lorna, developed melanoma.
Yes.
And that must have been extraordinarily difficult at that time of your life. Your reflections on that were some pretty sad times, I would imagine.
Yeah, they were very sad times. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for having me tonight, and particularly Nick, who reached out to me and asked if I would like to take part in this event. I'm so in awe of everything they do. So anything I can do with dementia or help with this, I will. But going back to those times, we went for the Australian dream, and it was incredible. And we emigrated, and the kids were very little
3, 4 and 5 at the time. And we were living the dream. Lorna was a dressage rider, so absolutely loved Australia as opposed to mucking out in the cold, freezing fog of England with wellies on. So we had a great time, we made some great friends and had a really amazing few years there. And she developed melanoma, and that brought about the subject of what would happen if something did happen to one of us. So we relocated back to the UK, and sadly it was very aggressive, and she passed away only 6 months after returning. So it was pretty tough on the children and myself, and so my world fell apart. But a couple of years later, I was becoming super dad and doing everything possible to make the kid's life run as smoothly as it could. And my parents sent me away on holiday to go and have a rest. So I went away on holiday, very resistant about going. And I met a group of people at the hotel, and I was very antisocial, reading my book, and they kept saying, "Do you want to join in?" And eventually I got chatting with them, and then one of those people was Tyler, who was there at that pool. So I began to know him, and that developed over a period of time. And so that went on, and we were all living in the UK at the time. And then eventually some friends came over from Australia and relayed all of that story to the kids about how much Lorna loved Australia and how amazing her life had been out there. And it really encouraged them to want to go back. So, yeah, that's what happened.
Back to the land of Australia. And from that time, I mean, it was, and I think probably what you missed there is that, you know, it really plunges you into a depth of despair when you lose someone that you love dearly. And your parents recognised that, obviously, to send you away on a holiday to take a break, because I could imagine you would be super dad, doing everything for the children, because you've got three beautiful children to raise.
It was just horrific.
Yeah.
It was just as though she'd been killed in a car crash, really, because it was so sudden.
Yeah, no.
And we were so lapping up life, and it was so fun and challenging, and it changed everything overnight.
But then you came out of that period of time with a new friend, Tyler, who's now your husband, which is fantastic. I've met him here. He is here tonight. He stays in the background. But that relationship that came together has enabled your children to grow up side by side, because my understanding was that you had Tyler bought a house beside you in Australia so that he could effectively be nearby, but have that relationship with you and the family over time, which grew.
Oh yeah, it's a very long story, and it's a great tapestry. It's one of those stories that you don't realise is quite so fascinating until it comes back to you from other people. And all of these things that have happened in the future have now made me realise that it is a very interesting life, to the point where I'm now, I've been approached by a book company to do my book, which is coming out this year about
That's
it.
proud.
So it's clearly, thank you, but it's clearly of interest to people, but when you're in it, you don't really see it. But yeah, life's thrown me a few curveballs, and you deal with them one by one.
So everything's fantastic. You've got obviously your working your colleagues are here. We became close friends as well. You've been a very successful renovation expert.
Yeah.
Is it what it classified as? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, Ty and I lived in Sydney for many years, and the kids all had their careers in Sydney, and I eventually went to work for Cherie at her company, which is Renovating for Profit, and she teaches people how to renovate, and it was a lot of management and looking after people, making big decisions, and you've got to get those decisions right.
Yeah.
And so alongside that, I was renovating and developing my own properties, so building houses in Sydney and renovating those as well. So it's a very stressful period for Ty and I. And when you make decisions around property that are wrong, you can make big mistakes. So when you're working with builders and architects and real estate agents and that sort of thing, you need to be on the ball. And I was starting to notice I wasn't on the ball. Things were looking cloudy to me, and I was starting to make mistakes and starting not to recognise people, and also filing things incorrectly. I'm very meticulous. I'm a Virgo, and I like everything to be just right. And the only person who I know is more immaculate than me really is Ty. And he would come to my computer and say, I'd say to him, I'm going into a meeting to speak to all these people, and I can't find that information. Can you help me find it? All stressed.
Yeah.
And he'd come to my computer, and on the desktop, instead of it being filed in symmetry, it would look like somebody had thrown up on my computer because there were files everywhere. And it was just out of character for me. And he'd say, what the hell is going on? Like, what are you doing? And put it all right. And then a month later, say I'd be doing the same thing again. And he'd come over and say, we've sorted all of this out. Like, what is wrong with you? And this always led to me then going to my GP and raising all these issues. But at the time, my GP didn't really know much about it and would say, remember this street, remember this name, and I'd always pass, and I was fine. So literally, I put it out of my head, and I just assumed it must be stress or, something else, or tired.
Well, I think if anybody in the audience here were talking to you, they would say, yeah, of course. Look, I do those things too. Don't worry about it.
Of course.
And so I think, it's easier to reflect back and think, oh, there were these things going wrong. But what actually led to the point where you went, do I need to look into this further? So do you remember what that was?
Well, I'd got it listed with my GP for a long time that I'd had these queries and said, I feel as though something's not right for me. And colleagues at work were saying, we'd had a meeting, and then I'd meet the person again and reintroduce myself and have no recollection. Yet I'd got email trails, meeting notes. I'd been in the meeting with them in person, but wasn't recollecting them. So there were warning signs there. But it really, my GP, who was a lovely guy, just really wasn't very switched on with dementia. And so it happened to be at my cardiologist appointment that I was there one day, and my phone was going off. It was probably Cherie saying, where are you, And my phone was ringing. It got to the point where it was actually rude. And she looked at me and said, could you turn your phone off, And I just couldn't do it. And I just didn't know what to press or how to work it. And it sounds so ridiculous to explain to you at this point now, because I could no doubt pick my phone up and turn it onto silent. But at that moment, something just drops out, and it's hard to explain. And it was her that recognised what was happening. And I said, can you do it? And she said, no, just take your time, keep going, and let's just see how you're going. And I was there like sweating, thinking this is so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Eventually, she put it on silent. She said, I think we've got some cognitive issues that we should explore. And so she referred me on to a memory clinic, and that started a whole process of elimination and testing, which wasn't fun.
No.
But it was very in-depth, and eventually that led to how your brain receives information, and then it led on to brain scans, then amyloid PET scans, and then finally that moment came when they asked me to ask Ty to come with me to discuss the outcome.
Yep.
And that's when they said, unfortunately, you know, it's young onset Alzheimer's. And it was a massive shock, to say the least, because I was thinking it was something I could change. I could take a pill, get on with my life. I was at the height of my career and busy with my children and everything. And so it was a shock. And your world drops out.
You're only 55, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Look at you now, though. You are the epitome of enthusiasm for life and, you know, so active in the community and doing so much. Is that a part of your strategy?
Well, it's like, you know, when things come to you and you don't look for them, they've all come to me somehow. And so I didn't really know what to do. I was in despair. I've been listening to some of you guys' stories about dementia today, and it's so heartbreaking. And the amount of people who I've met through this journey have shared their stories. And I reached, my neurologist recommended Dementia Australia and said, go to them and explain, you know, that you're needing support. So this is when I was in a dark place at the beginning. I couldn't even believe it. And when you start to Google and research, it's not pretty. And I really thought it was the end of my life, like the end of the world. And I was convinced that in 5 years' time I would be in a home or something like that. And so Dementia Australia took me under their wing and educated me, and I did a course and that sort of thing. But I talk a lot, in case you hadn't noticed. And by the end of it, they said to me, would you become an advocate for us? And so I asked what it involved, and they said it would be something we think your strengths are fitted towards. And some advocates do the bookkeeping or perhaps do, you know, something else. But for me, they wanted me to front things and to use my voice. And so that then led to a few interviews and magazines and things. And then a media company created a podcast called Hold the Moment. So I don't know if any of you ever listen to podcasts, but it's called Hold the Moment. And a wizard, Kelly Reardon from Dead Set Studios, created it. And I co-host it with Hamish MacDonald, who some of you may know, who's incredible. And so that was it. It was to give a voice and a platform to people with dementia. And it was an interesting match because Hamish's father had dementia at the time, and I was living with the journey of being newly diagnosed, still very cognitively capable. But and so it started. And it just took off. It was so well received, and we ended up, we're just completing series 3 right now, which we've just been filming in Sydney. It's been listened to nearly 20 million times in 130 countries. And it's really, thank you. Like, it is, the team behind it are incredible, but it's just something that is so powerfully affecting people. Dementia is touching so many families. This podcast is giving so many people comfort. And for me, that makes me feel brilliant, you know, by helping. So it is sort of part of the strategy. It keeps me very busy, and my neurologist says to me, you know, it is tiring, but it's great for your mind. So I allow my energy levels to deal with it, but so yeah, this
amazing.
This has took off really.
You know, I find I get to talk to a lot of people who have, you know, the early stages or perhaps concerned about memory. There are a lot of people who are reluctant to share their diagnosis with family or friends. What would you say to that?
Well, I really understand that, and I understand that it's sort of a secret, hidden disease. And from the people that I've spoken to, it's so hard to stay who you are, keep your energy levels, and still find, what you want to say well, and not get lost into how the disease is developing. It's a secret disease that steals little bits from you bit by bit. And the worst part of it, I think, is the anxiety of knowing, will it be fast? Will it be slow? And as I said, I, for myself, thought I would be done and dusted really quick. And you start watching films like Still Alice, and you see how drastic it can be for certain people. And so the anxiety is there. But fortunately for myself, I've plateaued really well. My medication's great. I do a lot for my own brain health. I meditate, I do yoga, I swim most days. I do everything possible that I can. I eat well. So I really understand how people would want to retreat. I've heard people, some haven't got out of bed for 6 months. It knocks you for 6. And it's an awful disease in comparison to something like cancer. Cancer is terrible, but it's very celebrated with pink ribbons, and people are very supportive in that, and it's very understood. The difference with cancer and dementia is still very stigmatized, and unfortunately, unlike cancer, which often comes with hope or a cure, dementia, there isn't anything. It's literally, you can manage the progression of the illness. You can do everything to fight that, but you don't know how fast you're going to go, or, how it's going to affect you, because every single person's so very different. So I can understand a lot of people who are embarrassed to tell people that they've got dementia, because you're worried that people will treat you differently and perhaps start to give a different outlook of who you are when you're just wanting to be that same person you've always been.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting with the analogy of cancer, because I've been, I guess, there's many years that I can reflect back on. I don't want to say how many. But cancer also was a disease at that point where they used to say, don't tell the person they've got cancer because it will set them back. So the families would keep it from the person who had cancer. And I'm sure there's people in the room that remember those times. And I think, I hope that the work that you do will change the way in which people communicate and talk about dementia, because it's not like what everyone imagines. Everyone's journey is entirely different. And by doing the things that you're doing, communicating with people, encouraging people to talk about it, get out and be active, be part of the community, it can make a huge difference. So, you're doing an amazing job with being a strong advocate for destigmatizing, which is what it really means.
Well, exactly, and that's the intention. And the podcast has done masses for people. We have messages from all over the world from people who say they're touched. They listen to it in the dark of night when they feel very alone, isolated. There's stories from young people, older people, all sorts. And then that led to Australian Story, who then said, can we do a story about you? And then the Imperfects, through Hamish, said, can we talk about you there? And so these things keep sort of triggering along, and such as the book, like I said. And then people like Nick, who reach out to me and say, can you come along and give your support to an event like this? So, it's just a community thing. And it takes a village to, be behind change and one day a cure. And the generosity and the support from you guys, like in the room, people putting their hand up today and in pledging that amount of money is just insane. And my ridiculous friend surprising me with a $10,000 bid. I was like, what? It's like, I just can't believe it. So it's all for the greater good, right?
I just want to say, compelling, powerful, and you've opened a huge window for someone like me into dementia. And as you said, Kathryn, it can be hard for people to share. And you, Jim, it takes courage, mate.
Thank you
And
so much.
I think everyone will go home and they'll go to work on Monday and they'll go, I heard the most amazing interview with the most amazing man.
That means such a lot. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.